The desert hides a secret. A secret buried so deep that no one but the hero of the skies can find it, buried within both sand and time. In order to access the Lanayru mining facility, we first need to find and power 3 nodes upon a structure that seems to reminisce a sundial, and then travel 1000 years in the past to turn a dial with a legendary blade in 3 different directions in order for the game's 3rd dungeon to part the sands and rise out of the ground like a biblical structure. It's this puzzle that unlocks the secrets buried deep in the sand in the Lanayru Desert that holds a structure that is baffling in more ways than one, as it houses some of the best puzzles to have come from a Zelda game, whilst also making us question how this ancient mining facility came to be, and why it was buried within the vast desert, behind the most intricate puzzle inside of the game. So today, we look at this beast of a dungeon, one of the 2 best within this great game, as we aim to finish up and face the boss Moldorak. It's time now to take a proper look at the lore of this epic dungeon and work out the dark secrets of the Lanayru mining facility. The Lanayru mining facility is the 3rd dungeon of Skyward Sword, and will definitely need a shorter name if I'm to cover this in a theory video, because it is way too long not to get tongue-tied over. The dungeon itself is made up of essentially a mining facility that you need to traverse both in the time you inhabit within the Age of the Skies, and also the past, 1000 years ago, due to the temporal fluctuations caused by the timeshift stones. We have gone into these heavily in the past, so we know that these things were mined by the robots that live in the land of the desert. But what isn't made clear is the sheer scope of the operation they had, until now. We explored heavily the idea that the Sheikah took their stones to help create new artifacts that would be handed to heroes in the future, as well as to power some of the technology within Skyward Sword such as the Beetle. The Sheikah found a way to harness this power via Impa, who travelled back and forth between times in order to place items in key locations for various links of the future. Whether that be the hero of time, the hero of twilight, or the hero of the seas. It almost feels like in every game, Impa could have impeded in order to aid the hero, setting various items into chests that are conveniently placed in areas that often don't make sense within the setting that they're found in. The idea that the Sheikah use these timeshift stones to create, let's say, the Sheikah slate in Breath of the Wild also doesn't seem too far-fetched. As when we look at status, for instance, as an ability that allows us to create a temporal zone where time freezes, and we could even potentially say that Link's arm in the upcoming title, Tears of the Kingdom, is made up from the same technology as the Sheikah slate, or indeed made from timeshift stones, when we see that it would appear as if Link can use his arm to generate a power that returns something back to a previous state of being in order for Link to access the skies. Other items that flicked into thought here are items like the Ocarina of Time or the Lens of Truth. These aren't of as much consequence to our theory today. But again, it could help highlight the magnitude of the mining facility that was active 1000 years in the past. At first, when you enter into the Lanayru, you are greeted by a timeshift stone. And the game makes absolutely no bones about introducing this mechanic to its fullest, making you jump back and forth between the current and the past. And by the time you have reached this dungeon, you have fully explored the idea of timeshift stones and hitting them to suit your need. But this mining facility is undoubtedly different to anything that you've explored previously, as for the first time in this area, it becomes abundantly clear that within your temporal zones, the facility was not just a full functioning mine, but a large, full-scale operation that is not just used to harvest time stones, but to clear an entire area of them. However, when we look back through the dungeon, we actually see no actual evidence that any mining happened here whatsoever. There's no giant drills to bore through the rock, no evidence of any scrapper robots within the facility, and only beam-moths and robots that adorn the skies firing missiles at anyone who should get too close to them litter the halls of the mining facility. So if there's no mining equipment inside of them, and it's buried deep underground, what on earth is this place, really? Surely it can't just be an abandoned mine. This doesn't fit at all with what we see inside of the dungeon. When I first started looking into this topic to research it, I at first wanted to see whether or not we had any localizations that could help us find out any additional information, but I only managed to come up with one localization full stop. In other words, this means that in every other language that the game came out in, apart from one, the mining facility is called exactly that, the Lanayru mining facility. This is apart from in Dutch. In Dutch, the name of the Lanayru mining facility is Lanayru's Minbouw Centrum, which translates literally to Lanayru's mining centre. In all honesty, this isn't much of a help for us, as it's almost identical to the term mining facility. However, the word centre reminds me a lot more of a hub or a depot than where mining actually occurs. This could lead us in some sort of path to what the facility is, but it's 100% not concrete enough to form any proper theory. So next, we need to look at how to access the dungeon, and what we know about the dungeon so far. The puzzle we finished last episode was actually probably one of our biggest clues as to what this place could well be, despite the fact that we're not even inside of the complex at this current point in time. The dungeon opens after we repower the generator via 3 nodes that you must power up by solving puzzles en route. Prior to this, any visible signs of the temple are currently missing, and it feels like we actually find the mining facility by accident when we're looking for the Temple of Time. It raises out of the ground, once again like something biblical when the power is restored. It's been hidden away, not just in the present but also in the past. This indicates that it was hidden, and it was hidden deliberately, and this follows the theme of the area that we're in. Lanayru, as we previously saw, could well have been linked to an old lake of some form, and this is over more than likely due to the sand sea that we travel upon later on in the game. This would mean that enough sand has to be generated in order to fill the sand sea, not just cover it, because covering it wouldn't work. The reason for that is sand is more dense than water, so it would just sink. As a result of that, there has to be enough sand than what could have been blown in by natural forces. And the fact that this continues on into the Lanayru Desert is interesting also. So, just what am I saying? I hear you shouting through your screens at me. Well, that's actually quite easy. What I'm saying is that Sandsea and Lanayru were not filled by natural causes, but rather someone filled them. No human on the face of the planet could fill said Sandsea without magical interference. And of course, magical interference, or magic in general, is something that, while not visited often, is 100% canon within the Zelda universe. After all, we live in a world where medallions can cause lightning storms, dragons roam the skies, and a sword can transport us 7 years into the future. So, while it seems like it's a really easy write-off as an explanation for how the Sandsea became what it is, it's the only logical answer as to how both the Sandsea field and the Lanayru mining facility got buried. But who buried the Lanayru mining facility? And why? Those are the 2 questions that I'm here to try and answer today. At first, I thought about trying to tackle who hid the mining facility, but I hit a few roadblocks and realised that actually in order to find out who did the deed, we should probably take a step back and look at why the mining facility was hidden. Usually, when we as a species hide something, it's for one of the 2 following reasons: to prevent that item from being discovered, stolen or lost, or to cover up an indiscretion or issue caused by the item being hidden. Of course, there are many reasons why we might hide something, but hiding emotive states such as shame won't really factor into this, or at least if it does, it's a very small part of a much bigger picture. So, if we're hiding a giant mining or processing facility, who are we hiding them from? And if it's due to an indiscretion, what issue was caused by the 3rd dungeon inside of the game? If we answer both of these, surely we should be able to get to the bottom of who hid the mining facility to begin with. So, just who is hiding this ridiculously complex structure, and who are we hiding it from? We have established that the mining facility is used to help process the stones that come from the desert for someone, or potentially a group of people to create things that will help seal evil in this timeline, as well as future entries within the Unified Timeline. Those games in the Unified Timeline are the Minish Cap, Ocarina of Time, 4 Sword, and of course the game we're playing now, Skyward Sword. So far, we've concluded that with the aid of the Timeshift Stones, we may well have had the creation of the Ocarina of Time, Lens of Truth, and Mask of Truth. These items have all been admitted by being created by the Sheikah. Well, at least the last 2 have. And the Ocarina of Time is a legendary artifact passed down from Princess Zelda to Princess Zelda through generations of the goddess Hylia's descendants. These 3 items seem to be made from Timeshift Stones, with all of them having been made by non-magical entities, the Sheikah, but all having anomalous properties. So surely, if the Sheikah are behind these artifacts, then perhaps once the Sheikah were done creating the items that would help save not one but multiple timelines, they decided to just bury the technology in order to make sure that evil never got its greedy little mitts on the Timeshift Stones that they had harvested. After all, what could be more positively terrifying than pure evil being transcendent to time via the use of one of these stones? But that seems like an easy answer. And in case you've not been following how that channel works, I don't look for the easy answers anywhere. I mean, let's say you've built this facility, You've had your people manage to come up with technology that's not just ahead, but thousands of years ahead of the curve. You've harvested so many of the stones that you've managed to build a whole mining center off the back of them. Are you really going to destroy that? And if so, surely the Sheikah would aim to do so with more destructive means. I mean, sure, the Sheikah have magic at their disposal, but surely if they wanted to hide this facility from evil, the surest way would be to use their technology to destroy it. Just hiding it would be too dangerous. What if whatever evil force gained access to it? This wouldn't make sense for the Ninja Clan to just hide the LANARYU mining facility. So I'm going to shy away from claiming it's these guys that hid this world of technology from everything. Rather, the land would have been verdant and green once upon a time, with water flowing in the form of an ocean. Now, the Lanayru Desert is completely dry and arid. This tells us something too. As we've already established, it's not just the flow of time that has contributed towards this. In fact, the sand didn't just blow in from somewhere enough to cover an entire sea. So this is magic at full force doing its finest work. So when we look at magic, who has access to this? We've got a few people in the Zeldaverse who are capable of such feats. First of all, we've got the Gerudo Witches, Kume and Katake. But these weren't active in the time of Skyward Sword in the timeline, and they don't come into play until about 400 years before Ocarina of Time. Next, we've got Ganondorf, but he literally comes into play during the Hyrulean Civil War just prior to Ocarina of Time. So he's far too late in the timeline also. Next, we've got Zelda and therefore Hylia. But what motivation would they have to turn the ocean to desert when their motive is always around helping the people of Hyrule and not hindering them? And finally, we have Demise. Demise is a factor in Skyward Sword, and he's a factor even before the start of the game. While he appears at the end of the game, Demise is an influence right the way through. He is a central evil figure in the game, and it's the fear of him bursting free again that keeps Impa's motivation for sealing the imprisoned inside of the sealed ground. Wait a minute. Again? That infers that sometime before Skyward Sword, Demise escaped the seal inside of the sealed grounds, and this lines up perfectly with the manga, which sees Skyloft be lifted from the surface in order to protect the people from, you guessed it, the original flamed head demon himself, Demise. In fact, out of everyone I can possibly think of, Demise is the most likely to have the magical capability to blow this much sand into the area. I know I've harped on about this, but seriously, how much sand would be needed to fill an ocean? It would need a crazy amount. So based on that alone, the amount of magic required to fill said ocean would be considerable. After all, an amount this big would not just blow itself into the sea. This is enough to convince me that the big guy, during his last visit to the lands of Hyrule, changed the lands considerably. You could imagine a cold wind blowing, that flame-licked hair blowing about his face as he raises his arms and the winds pick up around him. And no, I'm not saying that Demise is a wizard like Agnim, but he is the purest of evil entities. And so magic in this vein would be a very easy thing for him to achieve. The winds would blow around him, and soon it would look like tornadoes forming. But not made of wind, no, made of a fine grain that would eventually settle like snow. Unlike a snowstorm though, this wouldn't take a while for the particles to form peaks and dunes. It would take mere minutes. The ocean's drying and encrusting before completely sheeting over with a yellow crystalline material, coarse underfoot but soft to touch. The storm would rage on, all of his anger and hatred pouring forward as these people were trying their hardest to aid a hero that had not even been born. He knew it though, and he knew of the legends, therefore he would attempt to snuff this out now, before he could be sealed inside of the realm between times. The building stood tall, almost like a pyramid in the dunes, with a large staircase leading into the heart of it. Soon though, the cold winds ravished even this structure, filling the cavity from the wind across the ocean full of sand. The structure would begin to pour with sand between the cracks in the stone and through the entrance, until it buried itself under the grains that had not been long spewing from every orifice. If Demise is the one who summoned the Great Sandstorm, then he did so because he was doing it out of self-preservation. Indeed, we've seen predictions and fables within Zelda games, and the games are designed to be told as if they are the legend, so it's not too difficult to imagine a fable being passed down about a hero who would eventually rid the world of evil by sealing it in the realm between times. If this is the case, then the evil would want to do whatever it could, by any means necessary to survive. And step one in this happening would be to rid the Sheikah of any and all technology that they could potentially pass to the hero of the skies. Next, it would also rid the world of technological advances beyond the world's current means. Without a doubt, the Sheikah are more technologically advanced than any other race in the entirety of Zelda. But has anyone stopped to question how they got so far ahead? When it seemed like the rest of the world was just stuck with building things the hard way, there's surely only one way, and that is that the Sheikah have indeed managed to harness the powers of real time travel via the Gates of Time and the Timeshift Stones. They can travel backwards and forwards through time. And that is Demise's real big problem. See, it would actually make sense for Demise to want to be stuck in the current past, although that's a bizarre concept, and not be able to be sealed in the realm between times. He wouldn't want the door of time to be open, as he could wreak as much havoc as he wants in the world and stop the hero from ever reaching him. The Sheikah moving back and forth in time is a huge problem, because they can deliver items to, or make easily obtainable items for the hero of the current time in aid to defeating the evil that Demise represents. They could easily be his entire downfall, and so, the Timeshift Stones and the Gates of Time would need to go. What better place to start than by destroying the singular method that they had of refining the stones with magical properties? I can't think of one either. So, Demise buried the mining facility, and he did it for the lulz. No, wait. He did it to protect himself. But what about the issue caused by the mining facility? What was the issue caused by it? Why did it need covering? The Lanayru mining facility is at its core a technological hub. It houses more technology than any other location in any other Zelda game. That in of itself is a massive problem, as it far outdates any means used anywhere within Skyward Sword. Now, we could get around this by looking at the tribes within Skyward Sword, and not one of them is human, nor had the desire to use such instruments. But if we're going with that idea, then we must presume that all life evolved after Skyward Sword in terms of a human race. But this technology exists, and it existed 1,000 years ago, along with the robots, and I'm not sure that mining robots of Lanayru could create this without creative thought, and those guys were 100% programmed. Free thought like this could only really have come from human intervention, so there must have been humans around 1,000 years in the past. Which means... oh no. Oh god. In the 1,000 years between the past and current times highlighted in Skyward Sword, all human life is extinguished. That's why we have no life other than the life left in Skyloft. So this means Demise succeeded in his first attempt. After highly rendered Skyloft from the Earth, all life was destroyed, and we were left with nothing but creatures who were set to evolve more as time went on. However, in this day and age, we can't build the technology in the Lanayru mine. Then how on earth did it end up everywhere in this place 1,000 years in the past? There's only one answer to that, and that's the Gates of Time. The Sheikah. These insane magic using ninjas had worked out via Impa that these magic gates could control the flow of time. They could use the Gates of Time to bring back technology to the past from the future. They went forward in order to create the items in the past where they assumed evil, the evil that they would be hiding from at this time, likely to be a form of Ganon, would not be able to find them. So they transported the components to the desert in Lanayru in the past through the Gates of Time. Of course, they knew exactly what they were doing building this in Lanayru because they built it in the hub of the Timeshift Stones. So soon after moving and creating the bare bones of the mining facility, the Sheikah found said Timeshift Stones. They began to explore these anomalous stones and found that they created the same power as the Gates of Time, but confined to smaller areas. When these were found inside the rocks to begin with, the Sheikah moved some of their means to creating small robots that could then mine them going forward. The circle, as it were, was complete. The issue with messing with time, though, is that it almost always comes back to mess with you. If you've not heard of the butterfly effect, it's not just a weird film starring Ashton Kutcher. The butterfly effect is the idea that small things can have a non-linear impact on a complex system. The idea is based on the notion that a butterfly can flap its wings on one side of the world and cause a typhoon on the other. It's the ultimate symbol for regret, and actually it tells people to not regret their actions as if they had created a different action. Something more disastrous could well have happened. This is where Demise comes in. Demise had already been around before he destroyed human life. He was eternal, an embodiment of hatred and loathing that comes to wreak havoc on a world of hatred and greed. These ninjas had got too greedy. They had messed with time in order to further their own means, and he would act as supreme justice. He would come to Earth and do once again what he needed to do in order to fix the space and time continuum. Yeah, that's right. In this story, the good guys are not necessarily the Sheikah. If they hadn't been so quick to mess around with time, there would be no need to fix this because there'd be nothing left to fix. And therefore Demise doesn't need to break away from the seal that was placed on him by Hylia. He doesn't need to fix the space-time continuum. He doesn't need to appear. And as time goes on, the Sheikah from the future create more and more until he reappears in the lands and causes a giant sandstorm. He wipes the life from the land. He wipes sand across the sea and covers the building from top to bottom. The Sheikah unfortunately are wiped out during this. Apart from one, who is still located within her own time. One that we will get to know and love on a very regular basis as the Zelda series pans out. And that is where I need to stop this theory, because I could easily slip into a whole nother thing here, but I'm going to save that one for a future episode, and I cannot wait to get carried away with that one as well. In case you can't tell, this game builds an awful lot of the world from before, after and during the game, with the things it says and does, and more importantly, the things that it doesn't necessarily spell out loud. But before I sign off for this video, I would just like to take a second to thank everyone. When I started this 13 or so weeks ago, I didn't think I'd be sat with 50 or so subscribers and a lot more regular viewers. Every week on week, I'm genuinely amazed by the amount of views each video picks up, and the comments have been absolutely brilliant. I feel genuinely humbled by all of you, and I'm so thankful for all of you. So thank you once again. If you've enjoyed what you've seen so far and haven't subscribed, please do. Each person we get in hitting that button is another person that joins this amazing little community that we're building. I love seeing your comments, so don't forget to drop one down below. Thank you all so much. Peace.